Hello, and welcome to the Mind Your Faith podcast, the podcast where we create the bridge from struggle to success. Each episode features a special guest who will speak about a hardship or mental health issue that they have gone through and how their faith helped them. These guests will share their story, coping skills, and ways to conquer. I know you'll love it. Let's get into the episode. I'm Mailee Minitello, and I am the host of the Mind Your Faith podcast. For today's episode, many of you have probably heard of my guest, but even if you haven't, I know you will love her. Today, we will be discussing the topics of anxiety and going through an eating disorder. Our guest will be discussing what it means to overcome this and become the best version of yourself again with God. The behaviors and emotions that go with them are challenging things to go through, especially when you are a young adult or in high school. This guest has been making TikTok and Instagram content for a while now and has over 8,000 Instagram followers. She is also the host of her own podcast, The Becoming Podcast. I've been following her since 2020, and she has definitely influenced me in my life. Today's guest is going to talk about her experience going through her mental and physical struggles with anxiety and eating disorder, and I know y'all are going to be impacted by this powerful story. Allow me to introduce you to Riley Davis. Thank you for joining me today.
I'm so excited to hop on this call. Man, I'm truly just honored that I was asked. So I'm pumped about this.
Yay, alrighty, well, let's get into it. So I already touched on what we'll be talking about today, but please begin to tell us your story.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with I've been a Christian since I was about, 5 or 6, whatever that means when you're 5 or 6. And I think as Christians we all want to say like, oh, it's only like uphill from there. But I think Christianity, like a lot of life and like a lot of healing, is not linear. And so I started developing, I guess I'll go ahead and start with that. I started developing kind of signs of like anxiety and disordered eating habits when I was really, really, really little. Because I've been a runner ever since I was really little, and I think sometimes those two things kind of go hand in hand. Um, yeah, and so I started exhibiting those signs. And then when I was about 14, I feel like it was kind of interesting. That's where I feel like I first started truly developing a deepened relationship with the Lord. But it's also when I first started really deeply struggling, as well with all of those other factors in my life. And so I feel like it was so obvious that that is exactly where the enemy like comes in when he sees something that he can steal and kill and destroy. He's going to. And so I think that's, yeah, when I really simultaneously started struggling with a lot of things, but also when I really found the Lord. And I do think there's a lot of beauty to be found in that as well, that I had him to walk with me through all of that. And so, I think that relationship with the Lord deepened in high school, as did some of those other things, unfortunately. And of course, I think all of our world came stumbling to a halt, like with COVID in 2020. And a lot of us, I feel like, started struggling the most then. And that's definitely true of my story as well. I graduated high school in 2020 and then went to college in 2020. So lots of transitions, yeah, lots of transitions, lots of new things. And yeah, I think all of the change, I think our innate human desire sometimes is to control. Um, and I think as Christians, we know who to turn that control over to, but it doesn't always happen that way. And so I feel like that is when kind of all of my anxiety and my eating disorder and everything kind of came full force, was probably like 2021, like right after freshman year of college. Yeah, and I don't know how much you want me to share about that. I just kind
However
of put
much
it a
you
little
want to,
different,
honestly.
but yeah, I think that's kind of where it came full force. And it's a long story of healing. But essentially after probably like 3 of the hardest years of my life, including college, unfortunately, I finally, I did end up going into treatment. And then, um, I don't want to say I found full healing, because I think in my case, once again, healing is not linear. And so I think
Yeah.
it's kind of definitely a process. And I always describe it to people as like, yes, the Lord can so totally 1000% instantaneously heal you, but mental health isn't always that way. And I refer to the scripture that's basically talking about how the Lord is working on us to completion, you know? And I think that applies to so many things, but also including mental health. And so yeah, you know, I've been on this like journey of healing and recovery and of course like becoming Smiley Riley
I keep
again.
seeing that.
Uh,
Yes, I love that.
yeah, that's like one of my favorite things because I think you lose so much of who you are to mental health and mental illness and Smiley Riley's who I was. And so, you know, trying to become Smiley Riley again. And yeah, I think healing, I think it takes a long time. And even though I'm like years into this process, I do think, I don't know, I think the Lord is always teaching us something new and always growing us, even when life looks a lot better now. So yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I love that you brought Smiley Riley because like I saw that as your like I think it's like your podcast tagline. I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I love that. Like that's so cute. Um, all right, so um, I was wondering if you could discuss the signs that you knew something was different, and then like when you finally like realized and came to like the realization that you had developed an eating disorder.
Yeah, so like I said, it's something that I have been struggling with since I was really little.
Mhm.
And that is not something that I even realized until I started therapy, and started like going into treatment and things like that. I think when we're little, we can't pick up on a lot of that. And
Yeah.
I think that's almost like a protection thing of our heart, which I think is really beautiful. But yeah, kind of after unpacking all of that in therapy, realizing I had been struggling with this since I was really little, both anxiety and my eating disorder. I think the first time that I really started noticing it though, was when I was 14. And so I actually developed a pretty rare breathing condition, when I was 14. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that about me. And I don't talk about it very often because it's technically chronic, but I also got treatment for that as well. And so I kind of forget I have it. It'll flare up on occasion, but it was a really severe breathing condition. It's known as PVFM, which is paradoxical vocal fold movement, or VCD, which is vocal cord dysfunction. I don't know, it has two names for whatever
Okay.
reason. But yeah, it's I got it when I was 14, and it's like extremely linked to anxiety. And so it's like a very real condition, but anytime anxiety flares up, it like spazzes and just like goes crazy. And so I remember them telling me that, and I was kind of like, what? Like, I don't have anxiety. What are you talking about? And yeah, I definitely did. And I think that's the first time I really started picking up on it. Because it becomes pretty obvious when you can't breathe.
Yeah,
And yeah,
that's more serious.
right, right. And yeah, and so I think that's when I started picking up on that and just kind of becoming more self-aware about a lot of the things that were going on in my life. One of them being the eating disorder. And so as far as that goes, I think for me it kind of manifested itself in like this idea of, I guess, trying to like be the best runner I could be and like honor
Hmm.
God with like my running and eat really healthy. And it just went to like the far extreme, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's how so many things are. Like we can have all these good things in our lives, but to what extent? You know, like the Lord does give us these good things, but at the same time, we can also abuse them and we can also overuse them and things like that. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of where I was at for a while. Um, and the hardest part about that, I would say, is asking for help,
Yeah.
because a lot of
Yeah.
times, like when you're in that state, you don't realize that you need it. And so a lot of times I feel like I always see materials everywhere of like, oh, ask for help, like go talk to someone. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. But I also think a lot of people don't understand that you're probably not going to ask for the help that you need because you don't think it's that bad and you don't think you need it.
Yeah, no one realizes until they get that help just how I feel like severe. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. That's definitely where I was at. So, it took years, honestly, for me to get the help that I needed, especially because I think even from 14 to kind of college, I don't think anyone else kind of knew, like anyone else realized that anything was going on. Even if I would say things, I feel like um a lot of mental health kind of has a stigma of like how
Hmm.
bad it should be, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't want to go to extreme measures if they don't have to. But I would say like go to extreme measures even if you don't have
Yes.
to.
Yes, definitely.
Because if you can get a handle on that kind of thing early on, it will save you so much. But yeah, I guess that's kind of how I, realized I was struggling with those things and then eventually getting help when it got to like, I guess what you would call like rock bottom, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so I would not recommend,
You're waiting
letting it,
that long? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's cool that you brought up the runner's world because I actually run cross country at my high school, so I'm kind
Oh
of
my gosh.
yeah, I'm like kind of in that world too. And so
Yeah.
I definitely yeah, you can definitely see it in like comparison, especially like if an individual sport, you definitely compare yourself your times and like how fast you're going in your speed workouts and then also like the eating healthy part and like, kind of obsessing over what you're feeding your body, like like they always eat for fuel, but then it's like that constant, like, almost battle, I guess, with
Oh, for sure.
that.
Yeah. There's a really amazing book. It's called Good for a Girl by Lauren Fleshman. Highly recommend it. You should definitely give it a read.
I'm
And
definitely gonna check that out. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's so good. And it talks so much about, especially being a female in the sport, and kind of the pressure that we're unknowingly putting on ourselves. And I mean, I love running. I could talk about it all day long. I literally work at a running shoe store. Like, I love running, but there is a lot to be said about kind of the narrative, I guess, especially for female athletes,
Yeah.
and kind of shaking that off and redefining what that means for you.
That's cool. I'm definitely gonna check that out
Yeah.
after this. All right. So you kind of already spoke about this, how like you really were growing in your relationship with God at like 14. But where did you find God like present like within this time? Like were you going to like a youth group or like did you have like kind of that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Man, I think it's so much easier, like in hindsight, to look back and see where God
Hmm.
was all along. So I think right now I'm like, man, he was all over it. Like I don't know what to tell you, um, but I remember in the moment too. I do remember like very specific like church camps and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like it sounds so silly to even say it out loud, but like when I was struggling with my breathing condition, for example,
Yeah.
I feel like that song, oh gosh, I don't know the name of it. Like I would know the name of it if someone said it, but um it's Your Breath in My Lungs, like that,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
that lyric.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I just
I
forget
feel
the
like
song either, but yeah.
I know. I feel like that's when that first started becoming popular. So it was like on like all the time. And I was like, yeah, it is.
There's a song,
But
I think it's called Just Breathe. Is that one? Or
I have no idea.
I
That's
don't
gonna drive
know.
me crazy. I'm gonna remember it later. But yeah, I feel like that kind of thing was just playing like all the time. It's always like these little reminders of just like, oh, but at least like I can breathe. At least I have the
Hmm.
ability to breathe. And on top of that, I think one of the biggest kind of things that like the Lord has been most present in my life is community. And I
Hmm.
think as human beings, like we were so designed for fellowship and relationship and community. And for me, I think that's where the Lord has showed up so much over the years. And so I would say like with both like my breathing condition and my eating disorder, especially like my cross country team in high school, I feel like was my rock. Like I had so many people telling me to not to quit, but like that it would be okay to quit.
Mhm.
Because I couldn't breathe and it made running very difficult.
I was actually
Um,
going to ask, like, how did that work?
Not well. Not well. I literally like I had to drop out of a few races. I remember that. And I was basically like a walking pace. Like we're talking like almost last place, like in like JV.
No.
Yeah, it was not ideal. But I think the reason that I kept going truly was definitely my team and absolutely my coach. Like my coach like just poured it into me to this day. I think I will literally remember him until the day that I die because he like truly poured into me and showed as much care and love for me like in my worst that he did even when I was like one of the best runners on the team. And so I think the Lord shows up in that way too, of by the way that his people love you, his love for you on like such a greater level.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel that, like, I don't know. I would go to say that cross country teams are probably the most like connected, like closest knit team
Yeah.
because of like what you all go through together.
Yeah.
Like, honestly.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's like they have like scientific studies on it now, like
Oh,
how
that's
when you
crazy.
go through like trauma.
Yeah, you're like trauma
Yeah,
bonded.
literally. And apparently running is like one of those things. So like your running buddies, like it makes so much sense. I also just think runners are like the nicest people ever. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So then my next question was going to be, how did God slash the church community help you through this time, but also like continues to help you today? So, you want
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think I touched on like
to?
how God was present in like my high school struggles and things like that, but I
Yeah.
think more specifically college, I think the beautiful thing is, and you probably know some of this, knowing that you did follow me in 2020, but I like heading into college, oddly enough, like met this huge community of like Christian,
The Praise
like,
House.
yes,
I
like
remember that. Oh my gosh.
I never know how much people remember, but yeah, just
I
like
loved the Praise House. I followed like all of you guys. I was in middle school at the time.
oh, that's wild. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, I found this like huge community of like Christian TikTok and things like that right before heading off to college. And so looking back on that, I think it's like absolutely mind blowing that the Lord clearly knew that I was about to walk into one of the hardest seasons of my life and was just like, let me set you up with like the body of Christ first.
Yeah, that's
And
crazy.
so even though like I went to college and then like a lot of them, like we lived all across the country and
Mm.
things like that, I still feel like I had them walking with me through like one of the hardest seasons of my life. And so I think that was absolutely monumental for sure. That was one of the things. Because college was lonely, like so lonely, especially struggling with a mental illness, like can be so isolating. And I think especially when first of all I entered college during the pandemic, so that's lonely in and
That's
of
tough.
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also you know, I think everyone wants to tell you that college is the best 4 years of your life. And for a lot of people, it like absolutely can be. For
Mhm.
me, like, I think there's so much power in telling people that it was not, and it's okay if it's not. And so, how was God walking with me through that? I think once again, it does go back to church community and, quality over quantity because I think so much of college you will see these like massive friend groups or sororities, things like that,
Mhm.
which can be so beautiful for so many people. But for me, it was learning that the Lord was placing these incredible people in my life, and it may be like few and far between. It might not be what it looks like for everyone else. But he showed up so deeply in the way that like I was with one of my friends last night and every time I think about it, like she walked with me through the thick of it, like
Mhm.
through the deep and through. like the darkest times of my life when I know like I was not a good friend. And I'm going to be fully honest about that. Like I know that I didn't have the capacity to be a good friend because of what I was struggling with. And yet she walked with me anyways. And I think once again, that
That's
just like,
awesome.
yeah, like it points so much to the love of God. Um, and like how he loves us through the way that his people love us. So yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. That's awesome that your friend like that's so awesome to find like a friend like that that's gonna be there through all of it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. What would you say were your most helpful coping mechanisms or anything else that helped you? I know you said it was like you got the help you needed and all that stuff, but what would you say like helped you the most?
Um, I love this question. So first of all, I do think going to treatment and going to therapy and things like that do equip you with those mechanisms for sure. Um, and I think, and this is one of the reasons that I actually started my podcast. There's a pretty significant gap between the church and like mental illness.
Mhm.
Um, or at least like the shame that surrounds it. I'll put it that way. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of times we're gonna have a lot of people saying, "Oh, did you pray about it? Did you surrender it?" And that can be so frustrating for
Mm.
someone that's struggling with mental health because in my case, I was on my knees every day
Yeah.
crying. Like that's not a question. Like
Yeah, you're like, I'm giving
don't,
it to God.
I
It's
was like,
there.
don't even go there. It's for a lot of people, mental illness scientifically takes like literal rewiring of the brain and of the
Hmm.
neurons that are sending like systematic responses. Like it's literally science. And we know that God created science because he
Yeah.
created us and everything within us. And
Yeah.
so I think we need to kind of redefine what being a Christian and walking through mental health can look like. And so for me, I think my coping mechanisms, yes, were given to me by like secular means, such as like therapy and treatment and things like that. But additionally, it was almost like rewriting this narrative between me and God of what healing looked like for me,
Hmm.
um, against like all the narratives, even if they were from the church, kind of redefining what healing looked like and what the Lord's role in that was.
Wow. That's such a good answer. Oh my gosh. Um, all right. And then how would you say going through something like this shaped you into the person you are today? Like, becoming Smiley Riley.
Yeah. Um, man, that's a solid question. And I was actually talking about this with someone the other day. It's kind of crazy. I would not be any part of who I am today without it. Which is really crazy. Would I like want to go through it again? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It
Yeah.
was a battle that I think thought I'd never get through. Um, there were times that I think you want healing, if that makes sense, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think that was my biggest prayer for so long was, God, I want to be healed, but I'm not there. And so kind of praying um that you do want that for yourself. And so I think, yeah, I think I wouldn't go back and put myself through it again, but I wouldn't take it away either, you know? And so I think I am so able now to offer so much empathy and hold so much kindness for everyone around me because and it sounds so like cliche like oh you never know what someone's walking through but like
Yeah.
truly
No, truly, yeah.
you never know what someone is holding and how heavy their heart is. And so I think like yeah, it's made me a far more empathetic person. Um, but also, I kind of said that, it was so isolating. And one of the biggest things that helped me was the people speaking out about it, about their experience and about the heart that they
Mhm.
went through. But there weren't many. And
Yeah.
so I think that's a huge thing that shaped me into who I am today is, as scary as it is, like that is what the Lord is writing on my heart currently, is really speaking up about the things that I struggled with and trying to hold someone else's hand, walking through it. Um, but yeah, and I think when I talk about becoming Smiley Riley again, I think in a way that smile was like far more genuine than it ever was, even like before I started struggling with those things, because I think it becomes that much more victorious.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. Any final comments or anything to add that you feel that my audience needs to hear?
Um, Gosh, so much. Like, I kind of think about if I were to talk to, younger me, whether it's like, before I really started struggling, or I don't know, college me or whatever. And once again, it's gonna sound so cliche, but it really does get better. And that sounds so cliche, but
But it's true. Like,
it is true. It
mhm,
is true. And we know that the Lord has mercies every single morning that are new for
mhm,
us, but um that's it becomes that much harder to believe when you're waking up every day struggling with something. And so,
mhm,
um, you know, I guess I would tell people that are listening to this, or even younger me, that, pain may come in the night, but then joy comes in the morning, right? That
mhm.
night might be very long. Like that night might
Yeah.
be very, very, very long. Um, but so much joy comes out on the other side of it, it's
Mhm,
going to blow your mind. And the Lord is going to put so many things in your life. Um, but yeah, we know that we live in a broken world and bad things might happen to us again and probably will.
mhm.
But the Lord is going to put so many beautiful things in your life that are going to remind you that A, he's been there all along, and B, like he will be there all along, surrounding you with goodness and not allowing you to walk through it alone.
Wow. Yeah. We just need to like hold fast to the Lord and like stand with him during that time.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I ask every guest at the end of my episodes which Bible verse is their favorite and what's their favorite worship song.
I was thinking about this, and
It's not an easy question.
it's not an easy question because I think especially the worship song can change every day, but
Hmm.
I think the Bible verse a lot of times is kind of dependent on like what I'm walking through. But I think a constant that I've clung to, or especially that I clung to in the midst of like all of my struggles, was Zephaniah 3:17. And it says, "The Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love, he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing." Kind of long-winded, but always a reminder for me that I think, first of all, God is never mad at you. And I
Hmm.
never thought that he was. In the midst of all of my struggles, I never thought that God was mad at me. But I think sometimes it can feel like the church is mad at you, which is a really hard thing. But kind of what I was going back to what I was saying of feeling all this pressure that I wasn't, quote, like being a good enough Christian, like I wasn't,
Hmm.
because I was struggling with these things. It meant my faith wasn't strong. It meant I wasn't relying on the Lord, which is just the furthest thing from the truth. Um, but this verse to me is such a reminder that he takes delight in us in the midst of our struggles, and he's not mad at us. And he, in fact, rejoices over us and quiets our heart and sings over us. And so it's just this reminder that, like, when it feels like your entire world is blowing up and nothing is peaceful, nothing is still, and you can't find, I don't know, that delight, and you're
Hmm.
searching for it in every other area, it's just this reminder almost to just sit and know that he's he's taking delight in you and he's rejoicing over you and kind of proclaiming that victory long before it's happened, if that makes sense, even though
Yeah,
it already
that
had
makes
happened. But
sense.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
um and I think as far as the worship song goes, I think, oh gosh, I have so much to say about this one. I love music. And so
Hmm.
I think that's a way that I really connect with the Lord. I think right now I've been loving, it's kind of obscure, I feel like. I feel like he's a smaller artist, but Prodigal by Josiah Queen.
I love that
Yeah?
song. Yes.
Yeah. Literally so good. That's like a current favorite of mine. But I think if I were to kind of reflect on some of the ones that I really held fast to, especially kind of in recovery and things that really helped me depend on the Lord as I was healing. The band MBL Worship. Have you heard of them?
Maybe. Like,
Oh my gosh,
I'm
you
not
gotta
sure.
write it down.
Okay.
MBL, the letters like MBL, they stand for
Okay.
Met by Love.
Okay.
Um, you'll never listen to anyone else, I swear. They're so good. But yeah, a couple of their songs, See You Right, One King. There's a few of those, especially One King. Um, but they provide such an intimate, I feel like, an
Mhm.
intimate aspect of worship, which I think is completely what it's intended to be.
Mhm.
Um, but they almost offer such a vulnerable, like, this is completely me and God and completely me and my heart for the Lord. Just completely bare and broken down. And so I don't know. That was huge for me walking through everything.
I will definitely need to check them out. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Where can we all follow you and continue to see you?
Yeah, you can follow me on my Instagram. It's underscore Riley S. Davis, or my podcast Instagram, the Becoming Podcast. You can also follow me on TikTok. I don't post a ton there anymore. But that's Riley S. Davis. And then of course my podcast itself is on Spotify, the Becoming Podcast. So yeah.
Definitely check out that podcast. It's awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I could not be more thankful. That was such a powerful story. And I know all my listeners were just as impacted as I am. I also learned a lot like that I didn't know as well, which I think is
Yeah.
interesting and cool. I'm so happy we're able to do this together. So just thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly could not be more honored, and this was so much fun speaking with you. So thanks so much.
Of course, thank you. Also, thank you guys for listening. Your support means the world to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you choose to listen. Also, the video of the filming of this podcast episode will be uploaded to my YouTube channel, Mind Your Faith Podcast. And follow the Instagram at Mind Your Faith Podcast to stay up to date and catch the exclusive content on there. Please share with family and friends to continue the growth. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm so grateful for all of you. Remember, you're not alone if you mind your faith and keep your faith in mind. Jesus loves you. Peace out, y'all.